What are some events in recorded history that are extremely hard to believe, but without a doubt actually happened?
Experience 1. Halley's Comet appeared in the sky when Mark Twain was born in 1835. The comet moves in a 75 or 76-year orbit, and, as it neared Earth once again, Twain said, "I came in with Halley's Comet and I expect to go out with it." Sure enough, he died on April 21, 1910, just as the comet made its next pass within sight of Earth. Experience 2. My colleague was on the plane to Hawaii when the entire top of the plane ripped off. They flew the rest of the way without any overhead. Landed and everyone walked off. Absolutely insane to see the pictures. Talk about being given a second chance. Experience 3. The Battle of Bull Run, one of the first battles of the U.S. Civil War, occurred on and around Wilmer McLean's farm in Northern Virginia. Not wanting to live surrounded by war, McLean and his family moved to Appomattox Courthouse, Virginia. The Battle of Appomattox Courthouse was the last significant battle between Union and Confederate forces. The Confederates signed the surrender order in Wilmer's sitting room. It is said that the Civil War started on Wilmer's farm and ended in his sitting room. Experience 4. There was a Japanese man called Tsutomu Yamaguchi who was on his way to work in Hiroshima in 1945 when he saw falling through the sky, 2 miles from where he stood, what ultimately turned out to be the atomic bomb. He had just enough time to take cover in a ditch as the bomb detonated, and miraculously, he survived. Somehow the Hiroshima train station was still operational, and so Yamaguchi, battered, bombed and bruised, decided to board a train to his family home so he could recover in Nagasaki. 3 days later, Yamaguchi was called into work to explain what he saw, which he did. At work, as he began to tell the story of what happened, the second bomb dropped. It was the reinforced concrete walls around him that saved him this time, and Yamaguchi quickly ran to find his wife and son. Ground temperatures in the city reached 4,000 degrees Celsius and radioactive rain poured down. The family's home was destroyed, but Yamaguchi's wife and son had thankfully been out shopping looking for burn ointment for Yamaguchi when the bomb fell, and they'd survived. Despite this ordeal of having survived 2 nuclear explosions and subsequent radiation exposure, Yamaguchi went on to live till 93 years of age. He died in 2010 after being recognized by the Japanese government as a Nijiu Hibakusha, or twice-bombed person. Experience 5. Saint Olga of Kiev. Her story is the ultimate revenge tale. I highly recommend people look her up, but in short, her husband was killed by a neighboring tribe, and she sought vengeance. The neighboring faction then sought to take over her own, seeing as she was a weak woman and ruling in her dead husband's place as her own son was too young. She invited them to her town as a show of honor. When the large party of messengers arrived, they were soon attacked and backed into a massive trench that Olga's people had dug the nights before. Standing over the trench, she asked them if they found the honor to their taste and buried them alive. But she wasn't even close to finished with her quest for vengeance. She sent a message back to the enemy saying she would accept an allegiance by marriage, painting herself as such a feeble woman that she would gladly relinquish her power to her enemy. But she requested all high chieftains to visit her town to socialize and garner favor. The chieftains came, and she invited them into the bathhouse to relax before a feast. They were locked inside and burned to death. But she wasn't done. Her next feat is her most incredible. After taking out most people of power from the other faction, she demanded tribute from their towns and villages. Not in gold, not in any material goods, but in the form of sparrows and pigeons. Thousands were delivered to her. The next night, she ordered her soldiers to tie a strip of sulfur to the bird's legs, set it alight, and release the bird. The birds flew back to the houses and homes they had nested in, and burned every village to the ground. The sky was apparently a blaze of fire for days. Olga emerged victorious and satiated. Don't mess with Olga of Kiev. She is known, quite aptly, as the patron saint of vengeance and defiance. Experience 6. Michael Malloy, aka Mike the Durable, aka Iron Mike. During the Great Depression, 5 men took out a life insurance policy on a homeless alcoholic that they were sure was going to drink himself to death. The owner of a bar allowed him to drink for free, but he kept drinking and didn't die. So, they tried to poison him with antifreeze. Didn't work. The turpentine, horse liniment, rat poison, and methanol. Still didn't work. A sandwich made with rotten sardines and tacks. Still no luck. Then they took his drunk body out in the cold and poured water on him. He lived. Then they ran him over with a car. He was in the hospital for 3 weeks but survived. Then they poisoned him with carbon monoxide and he finally died. They were all convicted of murder. Expereince 7. John O'Neill, the FBI agent in charge of investigating Al-Qaeda and Osama bin Laden in the 1990s, grew frustrated with the bureaucratic politics within the FBI and between the FBI and CIA that he felt hampered his mission. He decided to leave the FBI and take a higher-paying job in the private sector. On August 23, 2001, he became the chief of security at the World Trade Center. He was killed in the attacks just a few weeks later. Expereince 8. The Battle of Halys. In roughly the 6th century BC, the Medes and the Lydians were at war. The war lasted for 6 years and climaxed at the Battle of Halys. During the battle, a solar eclipse began. Both sides believed that the gods were angry at their long and bloody war and were taking the sun away from them. They declared peace that day, and the sun was returned. But yeah, a war ended because of a solar eclipse. Edit, so many historians. Wow. Guys, I didn't try to give a lecture. I just tried to give an example. Which is why I didn't go into massive detail. This is the gist of it. Expereince 9. Theodore Roosevelt found his boat was stolen. So, he built a new boat, tracked the thieves down, and arrested them. He then proceeded to walk them multiple days, without sleeping, so they could receive a trial instead of just shooting them on the spot. It was in the middle of a harsh winter, so he didn't handcuff them, for fear they'd get frostbite. Instead, he just kept himself awake by reading Tolstoy with a gun trained on them the whole trek. Expereince 10. The Ghost Army in World War II. Essentially, an American group of troops would deploy dummy tanks, broadcast fake radio chatter, and deploy loud sound effects over speakers to fool the Nazis into thinking there was a large military presence coming their way. The Ghost Army was used to deceive the Nazis and make them send their military presence elsewhere, which provided openings for the real Allied forces to move in. This was used in the later parts of the war. I never learned about this in school, but I discovered it on my own and thought it was fascinating. Imagine thinking a whole mess of tanks are heading your way, but in reality, it's a couple of inflatable dummies and a few speakers. Expereince 11. Everything having to do with Mad Jack Churchill. He reads like someone's self-insert OC in a historical fiction based on World War II, except he's all real. He was a Brit who fought in World War II without guns, instead preferring a longbow, a claymore sword, and bagpipes. Despite this, he won. A lot. He single-handedly took a whole village back from the Nazis by taking his shirt off and stealing around to scare the crap out of them with his sword. After the Nazis captured him one time and held him prisoner, under the mistaken belief he was related to Winston Churchill, the prison was raided by the Allies and he was set free, or he would have, had he not already escaped 2 weeks prior. He was on the beach on D-Day, with men under his command, and held them up in their boat while he played a song on the bagpipes, finished, lobbed a grenade onto the beach, and then charged. The war ended, and he was bored, so he went to the Pacific to go fight the Japanese. That ended too, so he got bored in retirement and invented river surfing. This is just a scrap of the historical anomaly that is Mad Jack Churchill. Expereince 12. The Rwandan genocide. My sister just graduated from high school, US, and she never learned about it. I told her about it and she did some research on it for a paper. Sadly, no one else in her class knew about it either. Expereince 13. The 1908 Tunguska event, an approximately 12 megaton explosion over sparsely populated East Siberia, Russia, that flattened an estimated 80 million trees over an area of 2,150 kilometers, 830 square miles of forest. It's generally attributed to a meteor air burst, the atmospheric explosion of a stony asteroid about 50 to 60 meters, 160 to 200 feet, in size, and likely with a relatively high speed of about 27 kilometers per second, 60,000 miles per hour. It is classified as an impact event. Even though no impact crater has been found, the object is thought to have exploded at an altitude of 5 to 10 kilometers, 3 to 6 miles, rather than having hit the surface of the Earth. It was the largest impact event on Earth in recorded history. Evenki natives and Russian settlers in the hills northwest of Lake Baikal observed a bluish light, nearly as bright as the sun, moving across the sky and leaving a thin trail. Closer to the horizon, there was a flash producing a billowing cloud, followed by a pillar of fire that cast a red light on the landscape. The pillar split in two and faded, turning to black. About 10 minutes later, there was a sound similar to artillery fire. Eyewitnesses closer to the explosion reported that the source of the sound moved from the east to the north of them. The sounds were accompanied by a shock wave that knocked people off their feet and broke windows hundreds of kilometers away. The explosion registered at seismic stations across Eurasia, and airwaves from the blast were detected in Germany, Denmark, Croatia, and the United Kingdom, and as far away as Batavia, Dutch East Indies, and Washington, D.C. It is estimated that, in some places, the resulting shock wave was equivalent to an earthquake measuring 5.0 on the Richter magnitude scale. Over the next few days, night skies in Asia and Europe were aglow. Expereince 14. The Irish potato famine, 1845 to 1849, was a huge catastrophe that resulted in 1 million dying from starvation and 1 million leaving their homeland, mostly for North America. It's really hard to put into words how scarring this famine was for so many Irish people, and the suffering was tremendous. The psychological scars still impact Ireland's psyche today. It almost sounds like a fairy tale to hear how a sultan from a faraway land heard of this tragedy and went out of his way to send ships crammed with food and medicine to the Irish people dying from hunger and disease. When Ottoman Sultan Abdulmajid heard of the suffering of his Irish dentist, he felt great compassion and sorrow for the plight of the Irish. The Sultan originally wanted to donate £10,000 to the starving populace, but British diplomats were aghast to hear this because Queen Victoria had donated a small sum of £2,000. The British government refused to accept the large donation, so he only donated a measly sum of £1,000, but he secretly sent 5 ships loaded with food. As you can imagine, the British government wasn't happy to hear of this, and the Navy attempted a blockade to stop the aid from arriving. The ships made it through the lines and arrived at Drogheda, Ireland, where they dispersed the food. The people of Drogheda were so thankful that they had the Islamic and Ottoman symbols added to their city's coat of arms. It really does read like a fairy tale and is a gesture of great empathy. It's easy to imagine how happy the starving people were to see those Turkish ships arriving with food. According to James Hack-Tuke, people were living, or rather starving, upon turnip tops, sand eels, and seaweed, a diet which no one in England would consider fit for the meanest animal. But the story does not end there. During the Crimean War, Britain joined the Ottoman Empire in their fight against the expanding Russian Empire. About 30,000 Irish soldiers served in the war, and it was noticed that the Irish people served enthusiastically in defense of the Sultan who had helped them during their greatest times of need. This highest form of compassion was even remembered during the First World War. It was reported that British officers complained that the Irish lacked the will to fight against the Ottomans, who remembered stories of the Ottoman Empire helping during a famine when no one else would. Sultan Abdulmajid is a model of faith in humanity being restored.
We hope you enjoyed listening to today's stories. If you want to see more stories, check out these videos or check the links in the description for more videos. And don't forget to like the video and subscribe to the channel. And ring that notification bell.